Hello students, welcome back. Now, this is unit 31 and in this unit, we're looking at planning conventions. When we're talking about planning conventions, we are talking how do we plan? Because we saw how to market in the last session. Now, we came to know about customers, we came to know about suppliers, and let's plan it in detail. So the objectives are how to plan a convention, and in point of view of a convention organizer, so what are the different points that we keep into consideration and what are various steps involved in planning. So a very good saying is, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. That's said by Benjamin Franklin. And indeed, if you do not have a systems in place, we as a humans are very lazy, I'm telling you, at least me. So what happens, we don't really work if you don't plan. So if you have deadlines to meet, your body automatically starts working to meet those deadlines, right? And there's no different story for a convention or meeting when you're planning those, okay? Now, when you actually plan these meetings, so we are actually going to make out if we are fulfilling those requirements or those milestones, and if not, then we have mistakes that we point out, right? And if that plan is in writing, so you actually can see where are we can actually put into the graph, right? And it helps us to find out, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is where I'm lacking, or what all different things would I be requiring, which is also part of organizing, monitoring, and controlling. Let's look at the steps of planning conventions. Number one, we're looking at organizers' planning, as I was talking about. In those, we actually have to set aims and objectives, as I told you. You need to set targets, all right? And then, when you set your targets up, now you break it down further to, demarking or identifying tasks. What is break it down further to the task? And then, when you know what the tasks are, who is going to do the task? Who is going to lead? That means you have to have different committees, right? So you have to have the head of those committees who are actually going to do those tasks. And then comes, when do we do those tasks? When do we complete? So we are planning schedules. And then, among all those things, we can never forget, money makes the mayor go. That means we need to organize budgeting. That means we need to know how much money is going to be spent where and when. Let's go and detail one by one. Number one, planning. So obviously, convention organizer is a person who is organizing a convention or meeting, and obviously in terms of organizing planning, so for the suppliers, so this is where I really want you to pay attention. Now, there are two aspects. One are suppliers and one are customers. Then who are we? As I explained in the last lecture, that the suppliers of the industry is the convention centers, hotels who give their convention centers or accommodation facilities for us to deliver to our customers. So this person, the supplier, for supplier, I'm the customer. Who is I? I'm the person who actually is getting a customer to the hotel. So I'm their customer actually. So I'm agent, but I'm bringing customer in for them. So they will take me customer. And who are my customers? So I'll put it this way. Let's take a travel agency. Okay. Cox and Kings. So Cox and Kings, if let's say IGNOU University goes to Cox and Kings and says, hey, I want to have a convention, right? So I become the if I go to Cox and Kings to get a let's say big conference done by Cox and Kings in Delhi. So Cox and Kings says, hey, fair enough. Do you want to do in Delhi or which place? Fair enough. I think we'll do in Delhi. All right. Let me go back and find out Usually they are the one who are doing internationally, but let's say, for the sake of example, we do it here in Delhi. They organize and speak to Hotel Ashoka Hotel in Delhi. Now, they spoke to Ashoka Hotel. They have a bigger convention hall. Fair enough. Let's do it. Now, for Ashoka Hotel, who is the customer? Cox and Kings. Okay. For Cox and Kings, who is the customer? IGNOU University. I think it makes it clear. So, for the suppliers, so organization is a customer, and the professional convention organizers, they actually like us, who advise customers. Who are our customers? IGNOU University are our customers who want to conduct the meeting. And we must know, we must have a format, a structure where we know what are the meeting demands, what are the requirements, and then we plan accordingly. Okay. Now, obviously, as the first thing says, we cannot say we're not planning. You must and must plan. Now, obviously, those steps are much detailed, and let's look further. First, aims and objectives. What are we talking about here? We're talking about that we must talk to our clients. What do they want to achieve? What meeting it is? What conference it is? What is the purpose of it? How many days? What time? What location are they preferring? Who are their clientele? Whom they want to focus on? If it is the product launch, what do they want to do in the product launch? Okay. And then obviously the needs will be different. But every meeting and every convention needs will be and shall be different. Why? Because no two conferences can be same. Even if the same people are sitting over there, they may have different requirements. Even the same meeting is there. Let's say annual journal meeting. Reliance wants to do annual journal meeting, right? Every year, annual journal meeting will be there, but will still have different requirements. Even though the meeting is same, maybe requirements of number of people over here, maybe requirements of how many food and beverage, requirement of accommodation, just electricity or media, lights, whatnot. So the example given over here, elections or even for unions meetings. And further, there's example given, if that was convention organized by IGNOU, as I was saying. So what do? IGNOU is saying the purpose is to get a feedback, maybe regarding extension education. So the purpose is, or the aim is to know about the experiences of non-government organizations that are in different part of the country, or even the aims and objectives could be to devise methods for sharing information amongst NGOs, public sector undertakings, local bodies. So what is this happening? This is what is the purpose of the convention, which IGNOU wants to do that. Now, to do that, to fulfill the aims and objectives, we have to know further, break it down to task. That means, now we know the objectives, all right? Obviously, we need to know breaking down further into task. When you say about breaking it further into task, we're looking at, okay, we have a list of tasks. What is the time that we have? That means from the time that we plan the task to execute the task. Now, I want to bring an example over here. I was actually teaching my students about preparation about Olympics. I know a little bit, it's very similar. I'm trying to take the similar analogy over here. Do you know that to plan for Olympic, it takes how many years? I'm not saying weeks and months, I'm saying years. 2018 Olympics in Sydney, the planning started in 2011. Yes. Now, imagine that's a lead time. Planning stage to actually event. Okay. Now, obviously, it's very important that we have the right decisions taken on the dates and the venues, and what is the accommodation requirement, and obviously number of participants, and among these participants also, what are the requirements of the rooms? Are they coming with family? Are they coming singles? Are they want to be in the hostel? Whatnot. Give you an example. A friend of mine, he owns a hotel in the US, and he says his hotel is located very close to the golf club. Every year there are 3 functions. There's a competitions, and every year those 3 weeks his hotels is actually priced double or sometimes more than 3 times. Why? Because he knows in that area there's no other hotel. Well, that's why the Airbnb is coming in. Anyways, coming back to the topic. So it's very, very important that we know who are the participants. Again, are they VIPs? Are they actors? Who are they? What are the requirements? Do they need any equipment? Right? And these are small things really help us to excel in providing the service. Now, do we need to send letters to them? Invite them on the behalf of the organization that you're planning for. State them the dates. What are the requirements? Ask them. Any displays, any exhibitions? Do we require that? Why displays and exhibition? Well, displays and exhibitions are an important part because if you're doing a convention, it's a huge mega event, right? You need people to know and understand and grasp. So there'll be a lot of information that will be displayed over there. And that's where you need to know which place, what information to be displayed, how much to be displayed, and when not to be displayed. And then comes is, if there is any secretarial requirements or if there is any technological requirements. Well, secretarial requirement? Indeed, we need secretarial requirements because secretarial requirements like, as I say, photocopying, any internet facilities, any typing facilities, data processing, maybe making placards, different things that they may require, visual aids, any special effects that are required in the lightings and whatnot. And then comes, a person who really is supporting, the organization to do a lot of paperwork, sorting out. There's a lot of small work which is required as a secretarial work. So under secretarial work, you'll have maybe taking a feedback, maybe distribution of papers, maybe preparing those assessment questionnaires, not assessment, the questionnaires. All those things, they come under secretarial requirements. Now, do they need any transport? Well, as I said, depends where your convention is happening. What is the requirement? Are we going to send a minibus? Are we going to send a bus? Are we going to send a charter bus? Or we are asking for a public transport? Or we are asking for you never know, a first class train ticket or maybe a first class aeroplane ticket, right? Who will go and receive them? Are you going to go to airport? Who is going to stand the placard and whatnot, or what timings liaising with those travel requirements? So with all those in mind, how can we forget the budgeting? Because we need to know that if in the conference we are being justified, our budgets, we're working within our budget. So when we talk about budget, what do you think is a budget? What do you think is a budget? A budget actually is a planning document too. Tells you, or you write it down, I have 100 rupees. So how am I going to spend my 100 rupees so that I can fulfill all those criteria? That means for the 100 rupees, I need to take out for the traveling. If I'm going somewhere for shopping, let's say 10 rupees for the traveling, going and coming back, maybe 50 rupees for, you can say for whatever item you want to buy. So we become 60, we still have 40 rupees, maybe 20 rupees for maybe your snacks that you want to eat, and maybe last 10 rupees you can actually put as savings or maybe spend it on. So that's again is called budgeting. Very simple layman language. I was trying to tell you, for a convention we need to look at who are the suppliers and whatnot. We'll come to budgeting in detail further. Then comes is deciding on types of literature That means if we have people coming for the conference or the convention, we'll look at what exactly is required. Now, when we talk about bags, the bags that we're talking about the bags which are given to the people who come for the conference, for the convention. When they go back, the bags will have your logo. What types of bags there should be, depending who's coming, right? If I've got senior executives coming, well, I'll maybe give a diary. I maybe give a folder, right? And then in that folder, what is the literature required? That is, will go in the folder and give them information. Now, these things are actually pre-planned, and that is a part of the budget too. Now, is there any registration process? Who's who? How do we know who's coming? Nowadays, with COVID in place, it's all, what's it called, your scanning, QR code scanning nowadays, isn't it? It used to be by hand before. And then how do we seek feedback from them? Did they like the convention? Did they fulfill their purpose and whatnot? So we ask them questions. That means we have to prepare those in behind, and then we have to give them. We have to send them either to soft copy, social media, or even by hand and physically ask questions, right? Now, obviously, if you are actually planning this activity, do you not think that you want people to know about it? More and more people to know about it? Because when they know about it, they'll be interested to come and have a look at it, right? And they come and have a look at it. Obviously, you are increasing your viewership. And especially, we want to segment the target. Whom do we want to see? Because we only want those people to see who are here to come and have a look and then maybe increase your business, right? So let's move on further from publicity. Now, we decided so far, we have, you've taken the aims and objectives. You have actually divided the different task division. Now, let's look at the committees. Well, someone has to do the task, isn't it? It says to complete above stated task, we need to form a committee. What is committee? It's actually a collaboration of people who join hands together, make a team to actually complete the task, isn't it? In simple language. So there could be committees or it could be subcommittees. What do you mean by committees and subcommittees? When there's a committee, why do you need a subcommittee? I will tell you why. If you talk about transportation committee, fair enough, you may have 10,000 people coming. One committee cannot handle 10,000 people. They may have road transport, they may have air transport, they may have taxi service, they may have maybe walking tours, maybe they be using cycling. So there's so many things, right? So maybe then they have subcommittees put over there so that we are able to fulfill the requirement of our customers, right? And these smaller committees or subcommittees are the smaller groups, and they do the task assigned to them. Now, the examples I've given over here, have a look, is registration committee, reception and transport committee. As the name says, reception and transport, that means you're looking after reception, people coming over here, welcoming them. And transport, quite difficult, right? I see a subcommittee over here. Then comes accommodation, food and beverage, secretariat, obviously, and then we have office bearers of the conventions. There's a lot of people who will be the people who will be running around, trying to fulfill the requirements of the office bearers, right? So all those committees are quite imperative to, smoothly run the show and to make sure that your convention is actually working and going with the positive results and managing so many people. Now, one thing I would say before I move ahead in the committee, what about law and order, security, isn't it? That's also part of it. Okay. Now, I was actually in charge of one of the committees when I was organizing a conference in one of the universities in Delhi. So I was actually conference coordinator. And I tell you, this forming committee and then whatnot, and then taking the feedback and whatnot was actually a bit of work that I did. Okay, now, what is helpful while you're performing committee? So you have to have a convention coordinator, and that's exactly what I was trying to tell you. So a person who's wholly solely responsible for entire organizing of the operations and of the conventions. So I was actually into that role, and I can tell you it is actually quite a humongous task. And this task really requires you to have patience, be organized, trust your team, and have the right team, and resolution or situation or problem solving approach. Now, to do that, there's another thing which is very important is a steering committee. A steering committee is a committee who actually overlooks the function of different committees and different, you can say, tasks that have been allocated. Now, these are the one who delegate the task, right? Now, this steering committee, it's actually maybe a member from each team to look over, all those tasks which are there. And obviously, they really need a backup support, some secretariat to actually have the correspondence, linking with other team members, and assistance provided. So, as I was saying, each member of it could be different, organizations have one member to become a part of the steering committee, and then they will be in charge of accommodation, registration, transportation, and so on, obviously, so that they're focused in one area, but they also are communicating with each other. Usually, in any area, a smaller group of 3 to 6, and then this group is actually looking after everything in that particular section that they are assigned to. There's another bigger group that really is helpful in conventions is volunteers. Obviously, they are the one who are directly handling, the operations or the duties, and these are the people who are really supportive because, as the name says, they're volunteers and they can be in a bigger number. But to manage those volunteers is a very important task of your steering committee. Now, the important aspect that you should never forget is coordination, communication. Because if you don't communicate with each other, what is the point of these committees, right? So, obviously, each committee is planning for their own activities, but you never know these activities clash with other committees, isn't it? Or they're at the same time, right? So, obviously, they should identify and evaluate quite alternatives before making choices, and they must have a plan. I would say they have an integrated plan or a supportive plan, so that you know that, okay, this time is my activity and this time is other person's activity, or this is what I'm planning, this is what other person's planning, and overall this goes to steering committee, wherein everything is systematic, organized, everyone can see everything. Okay. Now, simple thing example is a transport committee, right? So what do you expect from a transport committee? Well, transportation, isn't it simple? But what vehicles do we use? As I was saying, are we having corporates? Are we having executives? Are we having CEOs? Right? And if you are using volunteers, what level of experience do we want in the volunteers? Right? So are we using freshers and whatnot? So a lot of information which actually is required while we execute these activities of the committees. Now, I was telling you earlier that we have to make sure they are coordinating with each other. So example given over here is that a transport committee must have information about the arrival timings, mode of transport, delegates when they're coming, and obviously this must be given to the accommodation. Obviously, if they're staying in the hotel must know when they're coming, who's coming, and how many people are coming, then they can organize. They will ask for the choices and preference, and they can organize rooms according to that, right? So this is a very, very important aspect in the chain, because if you're not having a proper rest and recovery when you stay in the hotel, you actually, will not be able to perform the best in the next day. Now, there are schedules that we really need to make. Obviously, it's a very important step in terms of making a schedule, because if we don't have the right timetable, obviously, as I was saying earlier, it is paramount to put a deadline, and obviously we need to look at what activities needs to be done on what time, and then we have to have certain formats, which we're going to look in the next 2 slides, how the planning is done. Have a look. First circular, when this is going to go, when the invitation letter is going to go, so on and so forth. And then in further here, if you look at in the planning convention, 11:15 a.m. is first session, and then it's introductory remarks and so on and so forth. So this is how in depth that we need to go, and that's why we said we need to have secretarial services. And then when we're doing that, we must be planning in advance, because obviously you're not going to be doing this and not doing it advance and giving a last moment to everyone to do and come and hey, we expect you to be here. No, that's not a thing. And obviously it could be mailed, and nowadays it's in IT world, and things are very, very nice and easier. So coming to the most important part is the budget. We need funds. We need to make our budgets if we are within the required money that is being projected. And how do we make sure we control the extra expenses or the wastage? And then obviously we must make sure we look at where the income is coming and where the expenses are going. So I'm going to show you in the next slides the budgeting example. Have a look. So the example for the expenditure would be accommodation and venue that will be required, convention hall, delegates accommodation, in transportation, delegates travel, transportation in tea and coffee and whatnot. So, and this is where we also look at next slide, where we have income also. So obviously, the organizers, they get revenues sometimes from sponsorships, sometimes from government funding, sometimes they also have registration fee, So we'll have a look at it over here in the income state estimate sample. So registration fee is coming out to 50,000, and earnings and amount received from a sponsor in total. So in saying so, budgeting is very important, because obviously if you're not budgeting, if you're not doing profits, you're doing the losses, then you need to make sure, how do I mitigate those losses, isn't it? So let's recap to what we did. We first did how to plan a convention, right? We did that. We worked on from the point of view of a convention organizer. We looked at the meeting, what all things are required, and what are the various steps involved in the planning. We looked at budgeting, scheduling, and from aims and objectives to the task to steering committees to all. With this, I'm very positive that you have actually got an in-depth understanding of when you actually plan a meeting and execute a meeting. I'll see you in the next chapter. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.